Hey everybody, before we start the show, I wanted to let you know about this week's sponsor, Kobold Press. You know Kobold Press, you love Kobold Press. Kobold Press, run by Wolfgang Bauer, well-known game designer, a guy to start writing for Dungeon Magazine back in 1991. And Kobold Press is the creator of fine RPG products like the Tome of Beasts, the Southlands campaign setting, which is part of the Midgard campaign setting that they also created, the Kobold Guides to Deep Magic. I could go on and on. They're amazing. I love their stuff. Well, they have a Patreon right now, similar to a magazine subscription, where you get 5e content for dark fantasy. It is pretty awesome. A new part of the Warlock Patreon, which is the name of this magazine that they're putting out, Warlock, is Warlock Layers. These are short adventures for 5th edition. The first one, The Clattering Keep, is by John Sawatsky, who wrote Prepared and Prepared 2, which are also great Kobold Press products. You can look forward to future installments by James Hake, friend of the show. These layers are built on Dice and Logos maps and feature new magic items and new monsters. So you're not just getting an adventure, you're getting new critters for your DM menagerie. You're getting new magic items to reward / terrify your players with. It's going to be awesome. You can check it out at patreon.com/koboldpress. I am a patron, and I love what I get from Warlock. You are going to love it too. Check out Dark Fantasy at patreon.com/koboldpress. This is Tabletop Owl. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I am talking with composer Alec Shea, who has made some amazing music that we can use at our tables to set the mood. Also, you might hear some of this music in upcoming DSPN podcasts, so check it out. Here is my interview with Alec, a very smart guy, an amazing composer, and a great dungeon master. All right, everybody, now I am here with Alec Shea, who is an amazing artist. He's a dungeon master, and we have got a lot to talk about when it comes to music and role-playing games. Alec, who are you, and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Hello, everyone. So, my name's Alec, and I'm the creator of a website called www.tabletopmusic.com. It's a website designed for exactly that, for bringing music into pretty much any kind of tabletop game. So not just RPGs, but board games and things like that as well. The website was originally kickstarted and launched in beta about maybe a month or 2 months ago. And it's been an absolutely massive project, probably about three years of work that I've been putting into it so far. But the goal was basically to create something that just made it as easy as possible to start bringing music into tabletop games without having to search for something every time you wanted to change the music. Because I'm not going to lie, in my experience, that's often a real kind of downer on the mood when you're spending like 2 or 3 minutes trying to find that right track for the moment, and then the moment's kind of dead, and then you got to get everything going again. Yeah, so that's what I've done and what I'm trying to get out there.
That's really awesome. I love what you are doing with music and with tabletop music. So tabletop music is just a great site. You've got a lot going on, and I find that I have the same problem. And I even have the problem where I'll be like 20 minutes into a session and think like, oh, I should have prepared music, and I didn't, and now I've got to dig through my stuff, and this really makes it easy, and there's other programs out there that do similar stuff. I'm sure people know of like Sirenscape and that kind of thing, but this is really, really handy. So what is it about music in tabletop games that you think is so important? It doesn't seem like it's necessarily, a lot of us have played in noisy game stores or con halls or that kind of thing. What do you think music adds to the experience?
you can't really talk about it without sort of talking about the way that music kind of fits into any visual medium, I guess. I'm familiar with both Sirenscape, and tabletop audio is also quite good as well. But the thing I kind of found when I was using them, when I sort of first started playing tabletop games, was a lot of their content is kind of ambience and sort of sound effects and things like that, which is nice. But for me in particular, I'm a big fan of video games like Final Fantasy, Dark Souls, and even like Pokemon and stuff like that. And if you think about those games and not having the music that they had, to me at least, it would be a very, very large part of what made those games really special missing. When you think of certain bosses in Final Fantasy, or when you think of even just walking into the Pokemon Center in Pokemon, all of a sudden, like, you hear that music in your head and you associate it with somewhere. And a perfect example of this is back when I first started writing tracks for the project. I think I'd only written maybe 1 or 2 tracks at the time, and I hadn't even DM'd in my life yet. I'd played D&D for maybe a couple months, and I took the tracks to my DM for the session and said, hey, you know, I'm working on this thing. It'd be cool if you could like use the tracks. And not too long after, maybe like a week later, something happened in one of the sessions where one of the players had found a cursed item, and basically touching it caused their alignment to change from lawful good to chaotic evil. And so as soon as it kind of clicked for everyone in the group that had happened to them, it was at a point where they were trying to push everyone off a cliff and nearly resulted in a TPK. But as soon as we sort of realized, the DM changed the music to one of my tracks, and it was this really fast, you know, crazy piano, intense kind of battle music. And that played throughout the entire role-playing session of this event going on. And we managed to survive it. We got the weapon out of her hands, and, you know, everyone was okay, if not kind of stressed out and relieved that our party was still alive. But ever since then, that character still goes back and listens to that track and thinks of that moment, and basically can't hear the track without referring to that moment happening in the campaign. And in my opinion, that's exactly what I'm going for. That's exactly what I think music does, that no other kind of ambience or anything like that can do in any kind of medium, whether it be tabletop games, video games, etc. So I guess my goal is to get as many people as possible having those same experiences with my music in their sessions. A certain track comes on at just the right time, and then every time you hear it, you just can't help but think of that moment again.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. So you wanted to create these very iconic moments, almost like earworms, right? So my question is, how do you do that, but then also have it be music that can be sort of appropriate for the background? Like, my eternal struggle is like, this song is so specific and right for this moment, but it's not right for all of the other moments. So so you got to find it for the right time and everything. Like, how do you build that? How do you make that moment happen so that, when the music's playing, everything that happens is good without taking away from the game?
Like, on the website, you've got the ability to kind of just use the track randomizer. You hit play on a category, and, if you don't like the track, you just hit next. You try and get a better one. But you can also build playlists if you want to build it around kind of a pre-written campaign as well. In the film industry, there's a particular word, I can't remember the proper name for it, but one of my uni lecturers called it happy accidents, in quotation marks. And basically, it's kind of just when you put something with something that kind of fits, and then when you actually watch and listen together, things just kind of seem to sync up perfectly without you meaning them to. And even though it seems like it's impossible that would happen all the time, it just kind of does, because your brain kind of syncs it up automatically. So for me, at least, when I'm writing, I like to try and, sometimes I'll go for something that's really chill and doesn't really have a lot of noticeable stuff about it. It's obviously more designed to just go in the background. If I want to create something memorable, usually the first thing to start with is some kind of hook or some kind of melody that comes back throughout the tracks. And then usually it just ends up being a case of if that track happens to come on at the right time, that's when people are going to remember it.
So you've also, it sounds like you've also got to do the work of creating memorable moments in your game independent of the music, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that's a goal of any DM, I think.
Let me ask you a question. When you are DMing and you've got like a randomizer on, do you let the music influence the direction of the story or the game? You know, if an unexpected thing comes on, does that inspire you to go somewhere else with the story, maybe unexpected? So
far, since using it, I haven't done that kind of thing, but I think it's like a pretty kind of great way to get inspiration. I recently was sharing the site around on a Facebook page, and someone mentioned something about listening to the tracks while they were at work to come up with ideas for their next campaign. And I sort of realized, because even I do this, that everyone kind of forgets that, you know, you can use music as your inspiration just as much as any image. I'm sure we've all, you know, found an image online and gone, oh, I want to use that in a campaign. But I really like the idea of trying to do that with music as well. And I myself do a lot of homebrew and improvisation in my campaigns. So it's not something I've done, but it's definitely something I want to start doing. Is, hitting that randomize button and seeing what happens.
That's really cool. I think that could be really, it just occurred to me too, but like it could be a super duper fun way to run a game. It would actually be a great way to do like a live play or an actual play game, you know, to have a randomizer on and like, oh, you're in the tavern and you're having a good time, and all of a sudden the scary music comes on, so, you know, a monster shows up or whatever. It could be a really fun way to let that happen. So what do you listen to when you prep? What is your like DM prep music? Do you listen to the tabletop music as well?
Sometimes. Yeah, I have a few go-to things. I'm a bit of an anime fan, and I really, really like some anime soundtracks. So I get a lot of inspiration from those, but also, in particular, some of those games listed before. Dark Souls, in particular, I think has an absolutely spectacular soundtrack for pretty much any kind of fantasy medium. If it's got some kind of horror element to it, and Final Fantasy as well, of course. Especially, Final Fantasy inspires me a lot for anything to do with a big, magnificent fantasy city. That's just the first thing that comes to mind. And what's so interesting is that, Dark Souls, a lot of people have said that soundtrack is something that they use, and Final Fantasy comes up a lot as well. I love those soundtracks too, and I think video game and movie soundtracks are great for just writing in general, because there's generally less lyrics, and if you're like me, the lyrics can trip you up, or distract you from writing. I think it goes for most kind of sort of, I guess, background forms of music. Unfortunately, like a lot of films, or not so much fantasy films, I guess, but a lot of films are using sort of background music with lyrics. But I think the game industry and the way that the background music's going there, a lot of it translates really well into tabletop games, I think. Most of the time, the biggest problem, in my opinion, is when translating them to tabletop games is that the tracks aren't that long, because you're usually only in the same area for a short time in a game. But as I'm sure you know, in tabletop sessions, you can be in the same area doing the same thing for 8+ hours pretty easily. So, yeah. Yeah, that is totally true. And I think when you're playing a video game, especially one that's got a big open world like a Skyrim, right? Another great soundtrack, by the way. Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. They've got so much music, and it's meant to be sort of looped and listened to. And it's interesting because it's music that is meant to immerse you. And so by its nature, you're not necessarily meant to notice it influencing your emotion and your gameplay experience, but it is meant to do those things, right? Yeah, and actually another thing that Skyrim in particular does quite well that I would ideally like to work out how to try and sort of integrate this into tabletopmusic.com, but at the moment it's sort of a little bit complex to tackle. But the way that Skyrim's music sort of works, where you almost sort of the music ends up disappearing and you don't even really notice it's gone. And particularly when you're wandering around in the open world, all of a sudden that open world theme music that everyone knows just starts to rise itself out of the nothingness, and you're like, oh, this is nice, and then it sort of fades back out again. And it's all kind of done just randomly with their, programming procedural generation methods, and sometimes it's different music and it changes with the time of day and stuff like that. Yeah, it's all done incredibly well. I don't know how I would kind of program tabletop music to do the same, but it's something I'd really like to look into to some extent, I think, because it would be really cool.
Well, and it's hard to do because, the game engine in a tabletop role-playing game is like your collective imaginations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But maybe like some sort of parameter system or something like that, and you sort of slide things up and down. I don't know, but
yeah. I mean, you could even get your, like, as a DM, you could even set your track list, right? And say, all I need to do is hit next. And I know that the players are going to go from, the tavern to the forest to the castle, and then something could happen, right? Something could arise where the players say, oh, we want to go to the temple first, and actually what's going on in the tower sounds like a misdirect, and we want to go investigate the mountains, because they're driving the story, you can't even prepare that well for it.
Yeah, exactly. Which that was another sort of a big thing about what I tried to do with the website, because the playlist system that I've got integrated was originally a stretch goal, but I felt it was kind of really essential. So even though I didn't quite get to the stretch goal on Kickstarter, I ended up putting the money in to get it done anyway. But the idea is that if you're doing sort of a pre-written campaign, or even if you're like one of those players who prefer DMs who prefers to run set modules and everything's pretty like set in stone in terms of what the players are doing, you can create a playlist and kind of have the tracks follow what you're pretty sure the players will be doing for the session. But then you can just, as soon as something goes off the rails, you just hit one of the buttons. You've got a track that you weren't prepared for using, and then you can jump straight back to the playlist again when you need to.
Yeah, that is really cool. I like that a lot. That you can do that, because you could even set, like you said, for a pre-written campaign, or something you've just prepared for, your own thing that you've written and prepared for, you're able to bounce back and forth, which is great because you can have your preset, this is village X and this is city Y, and these, and I know the players are going to be here a couple of times throughout the campaign. And so I'm able to bounce back and forth and bring those and create, like you were saying at the beginning, creating those audio memories.
Yeah, maybe like you can even use the playlists, not necessarily just, in order of what you expect them to do, but maybe you've got a certain track that you want to associate with a certain town, or maybe you've got a certain boss fight coming up that you want to use a certain track for. You just have those over in the side on the playlist and then use the randomizer. As soon as you get to that moment, bam, jump onto the track from the playlist rather than having to find it through all the menus. Jump back to the randomizer when it's done.
That's really, really cool. So I'm really happy for that feature on here. And the music is awesome. Like we haven't really gotten to talk enough about this music. So talk to me a little bit about the different categories. There's kind of like each song can fall into one of several categories, and they can actually fall into, if it's a song that's scary and also appropriate for a particular type of environment, you'll find it in both of those places. So talk to me a little bit about how you came up with the categories. Like, what made you think these are the categories needed?
It's hard to clarify sort of an entire aspect of a tabletop session, but usually it's kind of either a battle, a dungeon, some kind of exploring that's not in a dungeon, or sometimes it's maybe not so common for other people, but I'm a big fan of kind of emotional moments and things like that as well, whether it's, a character who's gotten ill or something like that. So I felt sort of emotional plot music deserved its own category as well. And then, yeah, within each of those, there's subcategories as well. One of the sort of next big updates planned for the site is to get each of those subcategories their own like randomizer buttons as well. It'll probably be done along with sort of a whole UI update. At the moment, yeah, I think even just the general categories, for me at least, it's been more than enough. So I hope the same for everyone else. And then usually when I'm writing, I tend to sort of look through what categories I've got, figure out which ones kind of feel like they could do with some more tracks, or maybe some of the tracks in there I don't think are as appropriate as they could be. And then maybe I'll write some new tracks to replace those and then move those tracks just to the ones I think they're most appropriate for. And yeah, hopefully as the site continues to grow, it'll just cover everything really sort of specifically. And the tracks that are good for both will still be in both, but it'll sort of be limited to only tracks that I think are really appropriate for both.
Don't worry, there's going to be way more babble right after this.
Hey, it's Mike Shea of Sly Flourish and author of The Lazy Dungeon Master and Sly Flourish's Fantastic Locations. My show, The DM's Deep Dive on the Don't Split the Podcast Network, features a one-on-one discussion with guests like Sean Merwin, Enrique Bertrand, Teos Abadia, and more. Once a month, we dive deep into a single D&D topic and answer your burning DM questions. Watch us live on Twitch, on YouTube, or on our podcast on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Let's dive deep.
All right, back to the show. I'm curious to hear where you get your ideas. When you sit down to write, is it like you have a song in your head? Do you sit down to write for one of these categories specifically because you want more songs in that category? Like, what's your process when making music specifically for the tabletop music website?
It comes from a lot of different things, actually. Sometimes it's as you said, I just go, well, yeah, this category's kind of lacking compared to some of the others, so I'll write a song for that. Maybe I'll have a look on YouTube and find something from a game or something to inspire me that is kind of similar to what I'm going for, and sort of start coming up with my own ideas, piecing something together. Sometimes it just comes from people saying, hey, I'd really like a track for this kind of situation because I don't think you really have one. I'll go, oh yeah, I don't. All right, better write something for that. And in some cases, I've actually done tracks for sort of collaboration projects with other content creators. A good friend of mine, Vincent Baker from Vindicated Entertainment, has made a tabletop game called Other Worlds. And I did a track in collaboration with him that went into the collection, and I think he used it in a promotional video for one of his Other Worlds promos. And then I'm working on another one now with a guy from Map Hammer who's creating various kind of encounter maps, I guess, for all kinds of tabletop games. And he wants to do a few custom maps for Curse of the Strahd. And so, yeah, I'll do kind of like a vampire-y, spooky horror kind of theme track that'll go into the collection, but then also get used for some of the promo stuff for his thing, and bit of cross promo with some other up and coming content creators, I guess.
That's really cool. Would you you mentioned Curse of Strahd, and would you consider making sort of sound packs with someone, like with a collaborator if they came to you, let's say Wizards of the Coast, just for instance, wanted to do some sort of licensing deal and say, like, could you make the sounds for Curse of Strahd and and make one for, like, this is the Castle Ravenloft music, this is the Old Bone Grinder, this is Barovia, that kind of thing. Is that the kind of thing that you're interested in doing?
Yeah, absolutely. At the moment, I've actually got my web developer guys sort of refining the playlist creation section. And then hopefully what I'll have is kind of like a templates section. So I'll probably have a couple of sort of general ones of just, got this track and this track. But it'd be really cool to have a couple of templates for popular modules as well. Rather than creating your own playlist, you just hit the template and it's pretty much set up good to go for Curse of the Strahd or for Horde of the Dragon Queen or anything like that. At least pretty close to what anyone's going to encounter in any of those modules.
That's man, I love that a lot. That's so good and so helpful.
Yeah, the idea actually came from the Map Hammer guy when he was talking about, doing maps for the modules. And I was like, oh yeah, that'd be really amazing. So it's very high on the priority list for getting it added onto the site.
I love that you've already got that going. So let's talk a little bit about the actual process of creating music. How do you make music?
Well, I personally, I guess what they kind of call a bedroom composer. Pretty much everything I create is digitally programmed on the computer. I started as a classical pianist back when I was in high school, and I kind of did a lot of music theory as well. And I found that I was never really much of a performer, and I started to get into the whole composing thing. And yeah, in my late years of high school, I started writing a lot of music, and I ended up having I was in high school in Tasmania, Australia at the time. So yeah, very kind of a small, tiny little place, really, really far south down the bottom of Australia. But the orchestra there played one of my tracks, and I was, pretty excited to have an orchestra playing my music, and started doing a lot more composing, and realized while I was doing a degree in audio engineering that I really wanted to make video game music. So I started freelancing doing that kind of thing, and that's when I came up with the idea for this. So basically it's all MIDI programmed orchestral sound libraries. They're the same ones that you hear in a lot of films and games, called the East-West Library, as well as a few other ones. I do a lot of the composing with a MIDI keyboard. Being a piano player, that's the easiest way to kind of get my ideas on the page, so to speak. I guess like all creatives, I kind of start differently every time. Sometimes I'll start with like a melody that, I want to kind of build the track around, particularly obviously good for creating those kind of memorable tracks is to create the memorable melody first and then build around that. For Ambience Tracks, it's more a case of just looking for, I guess, sounds or ways to use instruments that just kind of give that feeling that you're going for. It's really hard to describe ambient music because it's obviously very empty, but when you hear it, it gives you a certain kind of feeling. So the goal isn't so much to write the music, but more to find the sound and then just sort of build around that sound so that you're don't just have the same thing going the whole time. And then, yeah, sometimes I'll start with the drums, in which case usually I'll only start with the drums if I'm after something sort of quite rhythm focused, like maybe an intense battle track kind of thing. Yeah.
I like that. That's really cool. It's interesting to hear the process because this type of music in particular is of interest to me because I understand how to write sort of a song from beginning to end, right? But I don't understand how to write music that is dynamic but also able to be in a loop.
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting process because I'm honestly like a pretty terrible songwriter, mainly because I can't sing. I never really got into songwriting, but the big thing with songwriting is sort of building around the chorus, but you don't really have a chorus in these kind of tracks. So it's more about you kind of have to create something that goes from point A to point B and has the same kind of feeling the whole way through, but at the same time doesn't really repeat itself, or at least doesn't repeat itself very much. I highly encourage anyone who's interested in composing to try writing background music just for anything. It's a really enjoyable challenge as a composer.
That is fascinating. And it's interesting because I was in a crappy band in high school. And so I definitely, like I said, I understand that process from start to finish, but I actually I produce episodes of another podcast called 20,000 Hertz. That's all about sound and the sort of the science of sound. And it's made by this amazing company. And we just did this episode about video games and about video game music and background music. And it is fascinating. I think what you do is so hard and also, like, by its nature, so underappreciated.
Yeah, I mean, maybe sometimes. I think video game music, particularly recently, has become kind of a big thing. A lot of games are sort of coming out with, like, the pre-order bonus will come with the soundtrack, and particularly like a lot of Japanese games love to push the soundtrack along with the game, just the same way that they do with the art and I guess with everything else, which in some ways I think is really great to push the specific elements of something as well as the whole project itself. Moving that back onto like tabletop sessions as well, I really love it when people sort of have a tabletop session and then find a way to kind of bring what happened in the session out of the session in some way. Obviously, like the simplest forms being things like 4chan green text stories. Some of those are always just amazing to read. But then, doing character art of a certain situation that might have happened, or in some cases, I even know people who have written songs for a song that happened in the session, like as a role play thing. And then after the session, they wrote the actual song that their character was playing or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know if you watch Dice Camera Action. It's a actual play Chris Perkins does of Curse of Strahd.
I am familiar with it, yeah. I don't know if I've watched much of it, but yeah, I do know Chris Perkins. He's the DM for Acquisitions Inc.
Yes, he is the DM for Acquisitions Inc., and he's the story director, story designer, I think is his official title for Dungeons and Dragons. So, he's writing lots of adventures and books about monsters and things like that too. And it's, but this game, there is this moment, and I won't get too much into spoiler territory in case anybody out there is listening or watching the show and catching up, but there's a great moment where two characters suddenly burst into song and harmonize with each other, which is just fantastic. And obviously they had practiced it, but it's done over Skype, and, they're like matching each other's time over Skype, which I think is really, really hard. And I do think those moments are just so incredible when they happen. And the other thing I think is, particularly for fantasy role-playing games that take place where there isn't a lot of technology, right? Even if there's magical technology, there's not a ton of it. Music has sort of, in some ways, become cultural wallpaper in many situations, right? We listen to it while we do other things. But that wasn't always the case. And certainly people still go to concerts and still just kick back and will listen to some music for fun. But I don't think it happens nearly as much as it would have in medieval times, right?
Well, yeah, even in something like Skyrim, or I don't know if you've seen Monty Python Holy Grail, just that story. For some reason, that brought thoughts of I can't remember. Is it Sir Robin who has the bard following him around? Brave Sir Robin, yeah,
Sir Robin's minstrel, right? Yeah, yeah, totally. So, how do you, when you bring music to like the forefront of your game, right? When it's not just in the background, what are some good ways to do that? Because I think that can also be, for some people, a little bit scarier, right? Like, it's like, I'll put on a silly accent, but I don't know if I'll sing a song in front of my friends. How do you, or play, right? Some people just will pull out a guitar, tune to a mandolin and strum it, or that kind of thing. What do you think are some good ways to do that without being obtrusive and sort of getting over the fear of that?
I mean, I actually haven't I haven't personally broken out into song in a session before. I have seen it done in sessions I was in by other players when I was a player. I mean, honestly, in my opinion, it's just a case of you kind of just got to do it, and you got to do it with confidence. Like, I don't think there's ever really that bad of a time for someone to kind of burst out into song. As crazy as that sounds, like at one point, one of our characters had some magical loot. They were a bard, obviously, and I can't remember what the actual magical ability was, but for some reason, it was a really good idea to pull it out and bust out a song in the middle of a boss fight. And so they did, and it was awesome. If you were to do it with like non-lyrical music, it's, I think, a little bit different. When you're sort of busting out into song, it's, it's almost like the game becomes a bit of a musical for a little while. So it's, the lyrics kind of are still involved in terms of what's happening. But if you want to actually use background music to kind of highlight certain things, it's really good for when the mood's changing. and you bring the music up and you let it play, and you don't really sort of tell people why you're playing this music, and then you bring it down and start bringing in what's happening. One example of when I did this was actually only probably a couple weeks ago. The players had taken this little fawn girl that had gotten poisoned and was kind of unwell to this. They'd gotten to this town and they'd gone off shopping. They paid the priest to heal her. They were all fine. And then they went to go get her again before they left. But before I sort of said, all right, you get to the temple where the priests are healing her and stuff like that, I just put on this sad music and turned it up kind of loud. And obviously that says there's something wrong, but they don't know what's wrong until I bring the music back down and start telling them. And in my opinion, that's a good way to get emotions out of people when they don't know why they're feeling a certain thing just yet because of the music. And yeah, you see that in films and games and everything as well. So even if you're like playing a game or watching a movie or something, if you have a listen to the background music that's going on and try and sort of predict what emotional situation is about to happen, I think that's a good sort of way to try and get ideas for what you might be able to do in a campaign and use music in the same way.
Yeah, I think that's totally true, right? Is to listen to, pay more attention to background music, especially in some of your favorite scenes of movies, and figure it out. Because I do think there are unexpected things that happen sometimes in the music that we're not even aware of. It's happening at the moment. But it's something that if you really pay attention to the music, you're like, oh wow, that's not what I would have expected the music to do at that point, which can be really fun. It can be a really, really fun thing to do. So, and I also, one of my favorite things to do is to have a track prepared, right? And have my finger on the button to shift over to the next track. I think it helps aid in surprise. If you're going to surprise your players with a sneak attack or a surprising emotional moment, hey, you've got a kid you never knew about, something like that, right? I think those are really, really fun, and you can use the music to cue that and to even like play up a great joke if you want to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you sort of go through and you can find like a track that starts with a particular kind of impact sound that fits exactly the kind of impact emotion that you want at that moment. The same as, I guess, in like a movie when you hear sort of a loud crash right as something busts through a wall or something like that. If you can nail that timing, to me, that's just like a whole nother element that it adds to whatever you're doing.
Yeah, that is true. Do you ever let your players run the sound, or do you, if you're playing in a game and not running a game, like ever offer to sort of be the DJ, if you will?
I haven't done it when I've been the DM, because basically I've only sort of been DMing fairly regularly since having tabletop music go live, or at least since having like pretty much all the tracks ready. And I knew them well enough to know when to chuck them in. But I have been in sessions where other people other than the DM have DJ'd. I think it's fine. I mean, it's a good way to sort of make sure that the music gets changed. In my opinion, the only sort of problem with it is the DM always knows stuff that the players don't, and you can use that a lot with the music. Obviously, the advantage to it, of course, is the fact that DMs have enough crap to do already. So yeah, it's always handy if they can palm something off to the players, even just for a little while.
I totally agree. And I think it also helps if you've got somebody who's a little more music-minded, right, who can do that stuff.
Yeah, that too. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Alec, one of the things that's really cool that you are a very generous and kind individual, and we love your music here at Don't Split the Podcast Network. We've struck up a deal, and you're going to start hearing some tabletop music in DSPN shows. So I can tell you, Have Spellbook Will Travel, our scripted radio play. When I shared this with Rudy, he was like so excited to check it out. This is definitely something that they'll be hearing, and we'll let you know when you're listening to an episode when some of Alec's music has showed up in an episode. So that's we just love it so much, and we want to share it with the world. And I really think you're like a very genius creative guy. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I could say the same for you. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Just recently, I was listening to I can't remember the title of it, but it was one of your podcasts about improvisation, and I'm a big fan of improv in general, like not just in tabletop games, but actual like stage acting improv. And so many of the things I heard there, I was like, oh, that's awesome. I want to make use of that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from somebody I feel the exact same way about. So, so thank you for all of the great content you make. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
Tabletopmusic.com. In the top left, there's links through to the Tabletop Music YouTube channel. Basically, it's just got YouTube versions of the tracks with sort of a bit of art to go along with it. And you can actually, I didn't even realize until I looked this up, but you can actually loop videos on YouTube just by right-clicking. So if for whatever reason you can't use the site or something like that, you can loop the music through YouTube, and it's all put there on a big playlist. There's also a link through to my Twitter, and that's basically my business Twitter. So it's got stuff for tabletopmusic.com, but it's also got stuff about any video games or anything that I'm working on at the time, as well as some of my voice acting work. And then you can also find tabletopmusic.com on Facebook. That's pretty much where I post any announcements or anything like that. And then, of course, the Patreon as well. The Patreon's got probably the most information on it. There's a big list of all of the planned sort of updates and features and things that I want to do. Examples being potentially like a spin-off kind of app version that's downloadable that lets you use all of the features of the site offline. I also really, really want to, at some stage in the future, do expansions. Sci-fi, obviously, being the probably the top pick, followed by a horror expansion. Specifically, kind of Betrayal at the House on the Hill, kind of spooky Halloween kind of thing. And then there's a bunch of other sort of updates and improvements that I think could really add to the site. So that's pretty much all the places that you can find me and find info about this project. Yeah.
That's awesome. And we'll link it all over in the show notes for this episode at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. My guest is Alec Shea. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. This was an awesome conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. I had a lot of fun.
Wow, that was an amazing interview with Alec. He is such a great person. Thank you so much to him. Check out his stuff, Tabletop Music, people. Speaking of tabletop stuff, Tabletop Babble, that's this show, is still new, and we need your help growing. We would love it if you could hop onto iTunes, leave us a review so other people can find the show. If you leave a 5-star review, I will read it verbatim and credit you. So that is some inspiration for you to hop onto iTunes and do it so you can hear me saying your words like a puppet on this podcast. Today's 5-star review comes from Narfstein, and it is entitled, Baller Rating Level is Exceeding the Limits. First of all, that in itself is a review. You have a way with words, Narfstein, so thank you for that. Here is the review. James Introcaso was deserving of his own show in this podcast landscape, and now he has it. He always seems to follow the rule of cool and keeps things flowing and on topic. His guests and himself chat about all the various topics related to gaming that any DM or GM could learn from, or they gather some insight into the mind of someone who takes this hobby to another level with various insiders in the industry. Rock and roll and keep up the good work. Narfstein, thank you so much. This is an incredible review, and it really just made my day. So thank you so much for brightening my day, leaving me a review. People, if you want to brighten my day, or if you want to make me say something silly, head on over to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. People, you can find me on Twitter at James Introcaso, and you can follow all of the game design work I'm doing over at worldbuilderblog.me. Within the next year, we are going to have some big announcements over on that site about stuff I've been helping to create. I am really, really excited. I can't share all that news quite yet, but you should start following World Builder Blog now so that you're ready when the news drops. We also have an amazing site that was created by Ryan Hennessy, so check it out. His work as a web designer is incredible. You know, people, Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. If you like this show, you should check out the DM's Deep Dive. You know, we have a Twitch channel where you can watch the DM's Deep Dive and Venture Maidens when they air. You should check it out, twitch.tv/Don't Split the Podcast. Twitch.tv/Don't Split the Podcast is going to have an upcoming episode of the DM's Deep Dive where Mike Shea of Sly Flourish, one of the most amazing game designers and DMs out there, is going to be talking with Mike Merles, the co-creator of 5th edition D&D. So check that out. It's at twitch.tv/Don't Split the Podcast. Alright people, like I said, Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Remember that RPGs are like sex. You can do it by yourself, but it's a lot more fun if you invite some friends. Hello, everybody. How's it going? We have one more sponsor I wanted to tell you about for this episode of Tabletop Babble. I'm talking about Lone Wolf Development. Who is Lone Wolf Development? Why, they're the makers of great products like Realmworks and Hero Lab. Hero Lab from Lone Wolf Development makes character creation a breeze, automatically tracking modifiers for every single stat, ability, item, spell, and option that you select and expect. They have been working on this character builder for years, updating it, making great changes. Hero Lab is awesome, whether you're using Pathfinder, Shadowrun, Call of Cthulhu, Mutants and Masterminds, 5th edition, 4th edition. So much great stuff. Hero Lab supports them all. You can print your heroes, and you have many output options to choose from. You could email your hero to another Hero Lab user, or you can save it as a PDF, send it and share it that way. The validation engine verifies that your character satisfies all rules, providing a detailed report of errors encountered and highlighting the errors for quick and easy correction. The use of validation instead of enforcement allows you to ignore errors reported, making it easy to accommodate house rules. What's that? Oh, that's right. You can also use your self-created content, armor, feats, magic items, races, classes, spells, you name it, the content editor can handle it. The authoring kit allows you to create your own game systems with PDF and wiki documentation and a skeleton game system to get you started. D20 and Fantasy Grounds allow you to support or create Pathfinder or D20 system characters in Hero Lab before transferring them to those virtual tables. You can find out more at GetHeroLab.com. That's GetHeroLab.com. Check them out and tell them that DSPN sent you.